There is a particular way your mind returns to moments that have already ended. A conversation that is no longer happening. A sentence that was spoken hours or years ago. A tone you noticed only after the room went quiet. The scene reappears without asking permission. Not dramatically. Just calmly, as if it never truly left. You hear the words again? You feel the space between them? You notice what you said? What you didn't say? What might have landed differently if the timing had shifted by even a second? The body is here, in the present, but something inside you is still seated in that earlier moment, listening closely, replaying what was already over. This doesn't come from obsession, it comes from attention, from a mind that learned to stay alert to meaning, to nuance, to what lived underneath the obvious exchange. At some point, noticing became a way of staying connected, or staying safe, or staying ahead of what might come next. Conversations were not just exchanges of information, they were signals, emotional weather, clues about how you were being received, how stable the ground was beneath you. So your mind learned to hold on to them a little longer, to review, to check for anything missed. This wasn't a flaw. It was a form of care shaped by experience. When a conversation ends, your awareness doesn't shut off with it. The words may stop, but the implications don't. There is still meaning to sort through, still context to understand, still a sense that something important might be hidden just beneath the surface. Your mind stays with it not because it wants to suffer, but because it wants clarity, because unfinished understanding feels heavier than the memory itself. And so the replay begins again, not urgently, but persistently, as if the mind believes that if it listens closely enough this time, it will finally hear what it needs. Over time, these replays begin to feel automatic. You are washing your hands, and suddenly you are back in that room. You are lying in bed, and the conversation returns, unchanged, like a recording that never degrades. Sometimes it's something small, a look, a pause, a phrase that seemed ordinary until it didn't, and sometimes it's something larger, something that carried weight even as it was happening. The mind doesn't prioritize based on importance. It returns to what felt unresolved, what carried uncertainty, what asked a quiet question that never received an answer. There is a tiredness in this, but also familiarity. The replay becomes a way of staying oriented, reminding yourself where you stand with others and with yourself. It is not about changing the past. It is about trying to understand it well enough to feel steady in the present. And yet, the steadiness doesn't always come. The replay continues, even when understanding has already been reached, even when there is nothing new to discover. The mind circles anyway, not because it is confused, but because it learned that vigilance mattered. This is often where frustration appears. Quiet irritation with yourself for still thinking about something that is done, for caring when you wish you didn't, for being unable to let go in the way you imagine others can. You may tell yourself it wasn't that serious, that it's over now, that it shouldn't matter. But the mind doesn't replay what shouldn't matter. It replays what once carried weight, what once required attention. And attention, once learned, doesn't always know how to stop just because time has passed. There is also a gentleness hidden inside these loops, even if it doesn't feel that way. The replay is often an attempt to protect connection, to prevent misunderstanding, to make sure nothing important slipped through unnoticed. It is the echo of a time when being attuned made a difference, when catching subtle shifts helped you adapt or belong or avoid harm. The mind is not punishing you by returning to these moments. It is doing what it learned to do when things mattered. Still, the cost accumulates. Each replay takes a small amount of energy, not enough to feel dramatic, but enough to create a background weariness, a sense that your thoughts are never fully at rest. That even silence is populated by old voices, old exchanges, old versions of yourself trying to get it right. The present moment becomes slightly crowded, not because you are stuck in the past, but because the past never fully released you. There can be a subtle disconnection that grows from this. You are here, but part of your attention is elsewhere, finishing conversations that ended long ago. And because this happens internally, without anyone else seeing it, it can feel isolating, as if you are carrying a private archive of moments that still ask something of you, even though no one else remembers them the same way. Understanding this doesn't require fixing it. It doesn't require forcing the mind to be quieter. It is enough to recognize that the replay is not random. It is not weakness. It is not a failure to move on. It is a sign of how deeply you listen, how carefully you take in the world, how seriously you hold connection. The mind returns to what once mattered because it learned that meaning was not always obvious in the moment, and that paying attention later could be protective. There may be times when you notice the replay happening and something softens. It's not because it stops, but because you see it for what it is. A habit shaped by experience, a mind that stayed awake when it needed to. A system that learned to double-check reality to feel safe inside it. You don't need to push the memory away, you don't need to analyze it further. You can let it pass through without asking it to resolve. Eventually, some conversations fade on their own. It's not because they were solved, but because the nervous system no longer needs to hold them. Others linger quietly, without demanding attention. They become part of the background of who you are, rather than something you are actively inside of. This happens without effort, without intention, simply through time and continued living. For now, it is enough to know that your mind returns to what it once needed to understand deeply, that the replay is not a trap, but an echo, that you are not behind for still thinking about what is already over. You are simply someone whose awareness stayed with moments longer than most. And in this space, here there is no need to finish the conversation. It can remain unfinished and still be allowed to rest.